Hi, and welcome back to the 8th episode of the Pathfinders podcast. This will be the last episode of 2020, and I wanted to take this time to thank you for supporting us during the first 8 episodes of the podcast. We have the podcast distributed to all of the platforms through Anchor, and it's been very interesting to look through the analytics. Anchor doesn't include YouTube, but across the audio platforms, we've had listeners from over 24 different countries during the first 8 episodes. Our most popular platform has been Spotify, which has been followed closely by Apple Podcasts. Remember that you can find all the platforms the Pathfinders podcast is available on our website, which is 99percentlifestyle.com. Episode 8 features an interview with YouTuber and collectible expert Jamie Dolphy. 2020 has been a tough year for many industries, but one industry that has had a huge boom during 2020 is the collectible card market, especially in Pokemon and YuGiOh cards. I came across my old YuGiOh card collection, which I had from when I was in primary school, which is reception to year 6 here in the UK. There'll be a lot of people listening to this who can resonate with what card collecting was like during the late 90s and early 2000s. You'll be able to remember that Pokemon and YuGiOh cards were everywhere in the school playground. They was on TV and also in video games during this era too. This was a huge craze back almost 20 years ago, and as many people got older, they either got rid of their card collection or they're still hidden away somewhere in an attic or a spare room somewhere. When I found my old YuGiOh cards, I remember looking at the prices of some of the individual cards online, and I was quite shocked with how much they was going for. I had some cards that were in bad condition, and despite still being like that, they were worth around £100 still. However, when I was looking back in February at these prices, that was just a fraction of what they're going for now in certain circumstances. Big influencers, celebrities and musicians have brought a lot of attention onto the card collecting market as they got back into their old childhood hobbies as a collector. For instance, back in October, the rapper Logic broke into the mainstream media after purchasing a base set, first edition Charizard for over $200,000. This is a single shiny card, and entire booster boxes have been sold for more than that during the last couple of months. A first edition base set Pokemon booster box containing 36 unopened packs sold for just under $400,000 recently. This is a craze I'm extremely fascinated about, especially as I have some nostalgia to it as it was something that I did during school. I really wanted to understand more about the world of card collecting and what has caused this massive spike in popularity during 2020. Today's guest is Jamie Dolphy, who has a YouTube channel called CasualYuGiStuff. His YouTube channel is all about the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG card game, but more from a collector's point of view. He opens up older packs, talks about collecting old school cards, and even talks about and showing the process of getting cards graded. Getting a card graded means it is reviewed by a company, and depending on the condition the card is in, it will get rated between 1 and 10. The card is encapsulated with that rating at the top, and the most popular grading company is called PSA. If a card gets one of those higher PSA ratings, it can significantly increase the value of a card. Jamie actually also runs a business called Vintage Trading Cards, which acts as sort of a middleman for people in the UK who want to get cards graded. Today's interview looks at how Jamie got into the hobby, why he became a content creator in this sector, and his thoughts on the industry, the boom in value cards have had during 2020, and the various issues facing card collecting, such as various fake and scam products circulating, especially as there's now a lot of money exchanging hands in this industry. Before we get into today's issue, if you would like to support the podcast, then the best way to do so is by visiting the 99% Lifestyle store. 99% Lifestyle is a print magazine, but we also sell other products. Across the 6 issues of our print magazine, we have interviews and stories with creators from all over the world. Whether it's looking at how Ben Page survived the frozen Canadian landscape while being hunted by wolves, how Dan Mace got caught in a drug scam in Indonesia, or looking at the work of an Australian marine biologist and how he has discovered a method that can eliminate all methane production from a cow's diet, we have stories that anyone can be inspired and gripped by. Okay, let's get into today's episode with Jamie Dolphy. So just to get things started, can you tell people a bit about yourself, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jamie. I have my CasualYuGiStuff channel. Basically, a bit about myself. I'm 23 years old. I currently work full-time up in London. And yeah, basically refound my passion and love for YuGiOh a couple of years ago for the trading card game. I was a massive player and collector as a kid, but only really sort of came back into it, as I say, a couple of years ago. I sort of went in sort of full, dived in head first, really. And yeah, like I say, currently just working, and not really much to know, really. This year's just been a bit terrible. I haven't been doing much, but yeah.
So can you tell me how you originally got into card collecting? Do you know what year it was, and do you remember that moment where you kind of got hooked as a kid onto it?
Oh, 100%, 100%. So it was essentially back when I was living in Italy, because I'm half sort of Italian. I grew up in Italy. So I actually started the game when I was living in Italy. When I went to one of my friend from school's, I believe, 5th or 6th birthday party. And just before the party was over, his name was Pietro, so Peter. He was going around sort of like do you know how when you go to parties you get given a sort of a goodie bag or a sort of a gift bag? And essentially it was one of those, but he also had a big bowl full of first edition Italian Magic Ruler packs. So the Magic Ruler set from 2002, still quite relevant back then, and I think it was 2000. And if I was 6, it must have been 2003. I'm from 97 when I was born, so yeah, 5 or 6 years old. He just sort of came around and said, "Jamie, come on, take a pack. It's just before you leave, take a pack." And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm not really a fan of that really." He was like, "No, come on, I insist." And that really was the moment where I said, "Okay then, Peter, I'll take a pack." And I opened it next to him and packed a crab turtle common card, which to this day is probably my favourite card. And just it's just crazy how that sort of first initial moment really with Yu-Gi-Oh, my first ever interaction, is such a vivid memory. I remember it as if it was yesterday, and it's just crazy how the decisions you make change the scope of your life, really. It's if I'd not taken that pack, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing at all. I mean, maybe I could have, but perhaps not to some degree. Obviously, like, I'm a believer, what you decide is how your future is planned out, and it's just, that was one of the moments, obviously, thus far in my life that, looking back, I can see that was a key and pivotal moment, really, I'd have to say.
And I think it's safe to say that especially in the UK, the two main popular trading card games are Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And it seems like from a lot of people I've spoke to and a lot of people I know personally that there was many a craze during primary school. I know depending on where people are in the UK it's called something else, but between years, say, reception and year 6, there tends to be, that's where the craze caught on. How do you think that became about? Do you think it was all influenced from the TV shows which both those trading card games had? Because I remember that in my school, I just became aware of it due to other kids at the playground just bringing in these cards, and there was this big fascination around them.
Oh yeah, 100%. I can completely agree, because luckily, obviously, I've grown up from sort of an Italian, but also moved over to the UK from year 3. So I was in that sort of prime bracket, as you say, sort of primary school, year 3 to year 6. And you're right in saying they were everywhere. Absolutely everybody that you knew did sort of Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, playing in the playgrounds. Again, I have so many sort of vivid memories, happy memories of waking up on a Saturday morning, heading down with my brother and watching the anime for Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it was all sort of 2005, 2006, but they were still airing, obviously, the show. And, you know, with Pokemon as well, as you're saying, recently we've seen the massive boom, which we'll obviously get into in a moment, I'm sure. But also the sort of Nintendo games, for me personally, with Pokemon, is what I used to play hours on end. I used to bring it with me wherever I'd go on holiday, playing Fire Red. Somebody even offered me to trade my Fire Red for their, I think it was Water Blue or Aqua Blue, but I said no. All these sort of memories for me personally, I think, is exactly where, you know, and why we're seeing now that so many people are coming back into their hobby because of those child, you know, the good old days, the childlike memories that we just have such fond, you know, recollection of, really, Connor, I think.
And it's something you just mentioned then is also a comparison I've seen quite a lot from looking online and looking at content creators and also talking to other people, is that after that primary school period, say around year 6, a lot of people just cut that trading cards out their life and they just moved on to more things, and I've only just recently got back into it, perhaps say 10 to 15 years later. Why do you think that is?
I know, that's a great question. I think we need to tackle that question at its roots. So obviously, a coming of age thing where you say we stop playing, I guess it's just sort of what we perceive as to be sort of socially acceptable for somebody of your age. So you're right in saying that it was around about post-primary school that I stopped playing, because my brother, slightly older than me, 4 years older than me, he was already sort of year 10, year 11, and I was just joining secondary school. He sort of stopped, and then when he stopped, I had no one to play with, so then I sort of stopped myself naturally. Nobody, I think you just sort of, as you say, socially acceptable, and what sort of viewed as cool or viewed as unpopular is obviously trading cards. When you go into secondary school, it's a massive change. I think it's like one of those sort of life stages, really. Or one of your life chapters, moving into secondary school, because it's such a big change from what you're used to. And for the majority of people, it's changing school, having to make new friends from scratch. And if you go in sort of with something which could be perceived negatively, like from sort of a, let's say, opinion of those popular kids, you want to not be seen, trading or playing card games, really. And that's probably one of the reasons why I think we sort of lost out of touch with it. And I've done it. I think everybody coming back into it back then said that they'd play Yu-Gi-Oh forever, right? I definitely was one of those people that I said, I'm never going to stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh. My uncle and my dad were always like, you're going to regret that one day. You're going to come back and look back, and obviously we're going to be right, because obviously you're not going to play forever. But it's just that initial period where you stop for those reasons that obviously we've mentioned. But coming back into it is just a breath of fresh air, and the reason why I think we come back into it is because when you're kids, the money that you have isn't, as well as financially we are now. So we want to make up for lost time. We want to reinvest in the pieces and cards that we never used to be able to have when we were kids, and basically for all those reasons, I think, Connor.
And just to give people some context, I'm not too familiar with the YouTube Yu-Gi-Oh scene as a whole, but from what I can see, you're probably one of the largest Yu-Gi-Oh YouTubers especially in the UK, and your content is very varied around it, mainly opening packs and looking at various bits of mail that you're picking up, and it's very collector based. Can you talk me through how you started your channel and the thought process behind why you wanted to start that on YouTube?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, again, a very cool question. So, basically, I think what kind of ignited my interest back into Yu-Gi-Oh was the release of Duel Links on the mobile app. So, I downloaded Duel Links when I think it was 2018, sort of beginning of 2018. And then I found out that one of my friends was playing. One of my best friends from sixth form / college was also playing, and I was like, oh my god, man, like, let's play, we should duel each other. I remember playing this as a kid, it was so much fun, let's duel. So that was obviously with the sort of main reason as to how I reignited the spark. But as far as the YouTube channel goes, I wouldn't say I'm obviously one of the biggest sort of out there. I know there are many sort of long time famous YouTubers, especially those who pretty much didn't fall out of touch when they were children. They sort of continued it into their adulthood and teenagehood. Obviously I look up to the majority of those people. But as far as the channel, great sort of question as to how I started it. I started going in head first when I revisited my collection. I found out that there was a possibility to enhance your values for the cards that you dig out from your binders, from your loft, from your basement, wherever you find your locked away stored cards which have been untouched for years on years. I wanted to get them sort of PSA graded, and then I looked into that, and then I knew that they were coming back, so I was like, I have to do my first video on my PSA graded returns. And if you haven't seen that video, I was just so nervous. I literally had a camera. It wasn't even like a phone camera, it was just one of those sort of Acaso terrible cameras, I just put it on a tripod, just recorded it, and nervously started speaking. Really, it was just a muddle of content. And what I would say is just the best thing about it was I didn't know that I'd be going in sort of this deep, and as you say, varying the content, like with pack openings, with mail. I try to sort of advise my viewers like what is good if you're from an investing point of view, which probably we'll get into a bit later. What's sort of the best cards to buy, what trends to follow, and obviously with the PSA graded returns, that's just massively opened a new market for collectors, both for Pokemon as well as Yu-Gi-Oh. We've seen this year with the current climate, having to sort of be based at home and not leave the house, and then save, well, you could say save or lose money, but save money for not being able to travel, for not being able to sort of go out. People have just refound their passion. I think this year has accelerated that. And yeah, for me, with my channel, it was just a straight transition from always wanting to have had a YouTube channel to finding sort of a niche market in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I just wanted to basically vlog my journey with what I was doing. And as I say, if you compare like my first video to where I am now, it's just natural evolution and transition, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I will get into the PSA side of things in a bit, because I know that you're very knowledgeable about that, and there'll be some people listening to that just don't have a clue what a PSA is. But just to get things started around something you mentioned, I just wanted to talk about the 2020 boom, which we've seen, because there will be some people listening to this that would have heard stories that have broke the mainstream media about card collecting, but then there'll be also some people which have not got a clue what we're talking about here. But during 2020, it's easy to say that I think a lot of people have been able to get nostalgic hits by going back to their childhood and finding their old cards, looking at content online, and even purchasing new boxes, and really get some joy out of a childhood memory, and whether or not they're passing that on to their kids or just simply doing it with family members or just by themselves. But as more and more people have got back into both Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, the prices have completely skyrocketed through the roof for some old cards. I think some mainstream media have broke reports that certain Pokemon cards have been sold for upwards of $200,000, which is which I know some people see as insane for just a piece of cardboard. But I suppose now it's it's really looked at as a piece of artwork. I would say it's like a really modern piece of nostalgic artwork, especially when it's encapsulated in a PSA case. In your own opinion, why do you think there has been a boom in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I think it's due to the current circumstances. Obviously, with COVID being hit, and we all sort of went into 2020 as it's a massive year, isn't it? Obviously, having come from all the teens to 2020, but obviously with the hit of what's happened, it's not lived up to expectation, you could say. And I know, as you say, $200,000 for a card, and people must be like, what the hell? But from an outsider's view, it's easy to, again, judge and misinterpret what is actually going on, because you're correct in saying, what are the sort of two main reasons why artwork is worth, hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars, for example? Well, it's vintage, it's got the years, it wasn't made, in this year, we're talking sort of 15, 20 years old, with Pokemon maybe even older. And obviously it's got the collectability factor to it as well, which again, art is collectible, and pieces of art are very, very similar, as you could, as you've drawn similarities to Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, because if you get that Gem Mint 10 grade on a PSA card, which obviously we'll go into a bit in a minute, how to sort of grade your cards and stuff, people are going to want something. It's shiny, it's attractive. You look at it and you just, again, you get a rush of nostalgia. You remember a time where it wasn't sort of as bad as this year has gone. You remember happier days. You're always going to look back on your childhood and remember the good times as opposed to sort of the bad times. So in relation to that, my reason, as I think, to why the market's exploded is we saw the gradual collectors coming back into it, but then we've also seen we've failed to remember that sort of the big influencers in the world, I'm talking musician artists, YouTubers, just even famous footballers, everybody was once a child, right? And they grew up in the same era as us. So what were they doing in their playground? They were probably playing Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! So they're going to naturally want to come back into it. And if someone big comes back into the market, comes back into the collecting, community and world, then they're going to have a massive influence. It's just like saying, what if, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo were to come back and play, I don't know, shootouts, for example. He probably used to when he was a kid. He probably used to love it. But if he actually expressed his passion for it, I'm sure that would explode the market. People have such influencing power. So in relation to that, we've seen Logan Paul, one of the, if not the biggest YouTuber ever, come into it and actually really want to expand collectively. But then he sort of stopped. So he came in and now stopped, because that's what they do, these sort of influencers. They have a massive power over, the way in which markets are dictated. So with that being said, we've seen Pokemon cards skyrocket. I think, in my personal opinion, I think somebody's going to come into the Yu-Gi-Oh market very soon, and sort of do a similar effect. Probably not to the same scale, but I presume long enough that it will have a significant effect on the pricing of cards, even more so than we've seen now. There has always been sort of a gradual increase, but as far as now, we've seen, obviously, with Pokemon, just a drastic sort of market burst where prices are just ridiculously high. And I do predict something to happen sort of in Yu-Gi-Oh as well, for all your listeners who are sort of Yu-Gi-Oh fans, I'd say, Connor.
And it would be interesting to imagine what it would have been like, say, if you talked about influencers and musicians. So the Pokemon card, which was bought for over $200,000, was by the musician Logic. And it would be interesting to see if that story did break mainstream media, if there wasn't that high-profile celebrity attached to the purchase of that card, because I do feel like that, obviously, with more mainstream media attention, it does, again, get people back into wanting to dig through their old collections and then look up the prices and so forth, and then they probably funnel down into looking for people on YouTube like yourself or other content creators around the topic. There definitely seems to be more people getting back in as a collector rather than as a player, just from what I've seen from the trends looking online. But I think it's also important that we probably talk about PSA, just because there will be some people listening who some of the stuff we've already talked about might have gone over their head. So I just want to ask you, how could you explain what a PSA card is? Because just because you have a rare old card doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be valuable, does it, because of the condition?
No, exactly. That's or it's the key. The key is in the detail, really. The eye of the beholder. So what you're right in saying is, not every card is going to be $200,000, kind of, to be honest, or even anywhere near that. But basically, what sort of the whole PSA, what we mean is PSA stands for Professional Sports Authenticator, and they are the world's largest, based in the USA. Trading card graders, and by graders, what it means is you send them your cards, in short, they review them, and then they encapsulate them in a hard plastic case, and they give it a grade from PSA graded 1, which is the lowest, all the way through to the creme de la creme PSA graded Gem Mint 10. And the value of your cards obviously depends on the scale as to how well your card grades, but that goes for pretty much any sort of trading card. They do majoritatively of all of them, so they'll basically grade Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon. If it's been valued or graded before, then they'll probably grade it. So not just, as I say, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or Magic, which tend to be the three main. They grade sports cards, match attacks, shootouts, Panini. They will grade anything. So if you've got a couple of watchers who, let's say, have got some football cards, which I was kind of big on as a kid, they'll happily grade those too. And I've actually looked into it, obviously, sort of research-wise before this interview, and I saw sort of Lionel Messi's signed cards, PSA graded, are going for thousands of dollars as well. It's all individual collectability, isn't it, really? But no, as far as grading your cards goes, it's quite a straightforward process, really. You send your cards off either through a third-party provider which pretty much take off all the hassle and time that you probably put in setting up your own account and obviously doing it individually. But basically, you send them to PSA, you wait a couple of months, and it is definitely a couple of months. It's a long wait, and then they'll return back to you in slabs. Really, quite straightforward, I'd say, unless I've missed out on something.
No, thank you for adding context to that. And so when at the start of lockdown, I remember I like most other people probably had a bit of a clear out in the house, and I think that's how I ended up stumbling upon my old card collection from a kid back in primary school. And I remember just looking at the prices of some of them, and that's kind of when I kind of got intrigued by it, because I was quite shocked with how much some of the cards were going for. And as you said, just to give an example, I had a Blue Eyes White Dragon first edition from the starter deck, I think it was, and it's been pretty beaten up. It's pretty bad condition, and I'd say it's probably worth about £15 just looking online, just because it's got that real nostalgic attachment to it. And as you talked about with the PSA grading, a PSA 10 is like thousands, so it just shows the contrast in a price range between something that has been through that authentication process and something which is still bad condition, I guess.
Of course, because you've got a lot of fake cards out there as well, which obviously if you send to PSA as in fake cards, they'll refuse and probably won't grade it. Well, definitely won't grade it. Also, people who find their collections probably do have a lot of fake cards. I remember a lot of fakes as well. Just thought I'd add, Connor. So obviously you've got to make sure that your cards are obviously authentic, as you're saying, and PSA, the authenticator, probably the best in the world, will definitely determine that for you.
And that's something I also did want to talk about, because I know obviously that when you're passionate about something, you don't like to always talk about money and the collectability, but when there is money, and especially something like trading cards, which has skyrocketed, I suppose there is always that shady element to it, where there are people looking to make money from it in a non-ethical way, like you said, perhaps trying to scam people, and I know people would already personally have fakes in their collection, but I know there's been occasions, especially from looking online in the Pokemon world, where people have been opening fake products which they've bought for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it is a big issue, I suppose, especially when some of these products hold their value whilst they're actually sealed and not even open, and sometimes you can't even determine if they're fake or real before the product is actually opened. How big of an issue do you think this is?
How much of an issue do I think this is, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, massive. It's, again, a huge issue. You're right in saying that even in that sort of Pokemon world where you have those boxes that have presumably sealed and have been kept sealed since, 1999 or 2000, as you say, 20-year-old products, but have been tampered with, sort of resealed. It's a massive issue, especially for the fact that if you're paying for something and unaware of what you're paying for, it just goes down to, are you an investor or are you a collector? And if you're a collector, you probably know what looks like a sort of a fake box or fake or resealed pack, for example, but you really want the eyes in the detail. So if you are, as you say, purposely or solely just investing, you might go in blind. It's like if we were to try and invest in a stock market that we knew nothing about. You're just throwing your money around at your own risk. There's always risks. You're correct in saying there are not nice people out there who are going to try to sell you something. But obviously, what you've just got to notice is just try and get some professional opinion. I know I'm always happy to answer to any sort of my followers or subscribers' questions in relation to helping out, because obviously that's just the way I am. I love sharing and trying to help if possible. But in the Yu-Gi-Oh market, probably not so much as the Pokemon, because it's not as collectible and as expensive as Pokemon. But yeah, I think it is an issue. It does happen. Just look after yourself and make sure that you don't fall victim to any sort of scams. Luckily, touch wood, as of today, I haven't been victim of most, let's say, large scam. Like there was one time I sent a couple of PSA graded cards, let's say of value, a couple of £100, maybe a bit less, and they've claimed to be lost in the post. But that probably just is probability. There's not a 100% guarantee every time you send something that it's going to arrive. That's why if you are to meet someone in person and do a trade, probably a much better idea, so you can actually get your hands on the product or the card and see for yourself, really. But again, with 2020 being how it's gone, that's not as likely as it probably was a year ago to do that. So looking at and judging at pictures online or videos, it's never really the reality, I'd say. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree, and you did answer my next question, actually, because I was going to ask if you have fallen victim to that, because I know that you've probably opened thousands of different products around the card collecting market. So would you say that you've got a good eye to spot then what is a legit purchase? So I suppose there might have been times where you've gone to purchase something, but you've stopped yourself because you've been able to spot that, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with products, like sealed products, it's easy enough to identify fake cards. But for products, yeah, I mean, I once remember paying £40 for a Starstrike Blast first edition sealed booster box. It looked kind of suspicious. This was a good year and a half ago when I was just coming back into it. And the seller was like, I don't know what it is, I've just got this, right? And I was like, yeah, I'll take it for £40. They were selling for about 200 at the time. So I was like, pretty sure that it was real. I got a lot of opinions of people, let's say sort of 80% saying it was real, or maybe 90, and sort of 10, 15, 20% saying it looked kind of dodgy, potentially fake. So I did a YouTube video where I opened it, and it did turn out to be a fake box, just a very, very good fake. So you do have to be extremely careful when you are looking to make a purchase. Luckily, it was only £40 and not, say, £400 or £4,000. Otherwise, obviously, the seller had no strings attached. That was the agreement. He said if it does happen to be fake, which kind of obviously is suspicious in itself, I went for the risk and it backfired. But, you've got to take risks to make things happen. And if that box had turned out to be real, or at least the packs inside real, we would have hit a nice a gold mine, really. But luckily, I haven't been of any sort of victim to any sort of scamming. Although I know people that have, which is kind of sad. The community is strong enough to work together and sort of, because I've seen from my own sort of position, I've seen people take people to court, file police reports on people. It can get quite serious out there. So if you are looking to be a scammer, or to look to inflict a scam on someone, just remember, it's actually money that we're dealing with. You're not in the playground anymore. There's no swap. The no swaps back policy doesn't go when it's money involved.
So also about on the PSA side of things, you have also started your own business where you talked about how there's like a third party, sort of like a middleman, which you send your cards to, and then they are able to send it to PSA. And that is a business you set up. Can you talk me through about, I suppose, how you discovered this whole PSA thing, and then also what led you to start a business around that?
No, again, that's a very interesting point. But how did it all start is a good question. Obviously, I was like every other typical young adult looking through my cards, and obviously I found some rare ones, and I was like, I've got to get these PSA graded. But back then, it seemed so much harder to grade cards. It almost seemed impossible, which was one of the reasons why I was like, do I sell all of my collection now, make a couple £100, and that'll be the end of it, or do I actually invest time and effort into researching how to actually do things? And when I was researching, I found nothing. I found that there was not really any help or anyone grading people's cards, or not even a clear step-by-step method as to how to do it. So I was like, okay, there's something, the entrepreneur inside of me, Connor, to be honest, was like, there's definitely a room for an opportunity here. So what I did find was the vintagetradingcards.co.uk website, which kind of looked a bit dodgy. I emailed the guy, and he was like, yeah, I can grade your cards for you, just send them to this address. And I was like, okay, sounds kind of dodgy, right? Alarm bells were ringing. But what I did was I gave him a call. I wanted to know who he was and like how long he'd been doing it. But after having spoken to the guy, he seemed very much legitimate, and I sent him my cards. So he confirmed that they arrived. He sent them off. About 6 or 7 months later, after a frustrating wait, they arrive, a parcel arrives at my door. My 11 or 10 cards I sent came back, and I was shocked that sort of 8 or 9 got PSA 10s, 1 PSA 8 and like 2 PSA 9s. It was insane. One of my best returns ever. That was my first one. And I just remember how happy I was the day they came back, and I was like, everybody needs to experience their first PSA graded return. So I called up the guy, the owner of the website, and I said, hey man, like, thanks so much for the service. It was like amazing, but I think what you're doing can be improved. Like, your website kind of needs redoing. If I were in charge, I'd be doing this. Like, not in like a sort of like a what's the word to use here? Not like sort of a judgmental way, but more so like I actually wanted this guy to do better, right? Because if you're doing something right but not as well as you could be doing it, you got to improve it. So, cut a long story short, it was a long hour and a half. I was on the phone with him. He said, Jamie, or James, he was like, do you just want to like take over the business? And I was like, what do you mean take over? Because this guy's like a person I've never met before. So he goes, you just want to like buy the domain, the website off me, and then you can do everything that you've just said with it. Because I'm at a stage in my life where I've got kids. I can't really run it as well as I could. And then he was a really nice guy, actually, to be fair. And I was like, yes, of course I'll take it. So I took it and ran with it and made it what it is now. It's nothing special. I mean, I only really do it because I want to help people. I want to help people get their cards back and feel that passion like I did. But there are, a lot of options available now in the actual grading market. I'm one of them, yes. But again, PSA have sort of changed the way they're tiering their grading services now, which kind of makes it harder for those smaller fish in the sea, such as myself, those small businesses, to actually survive. So it was never really a business. It was something I did on the side in relation to helping people and collectors like me. But yeah, there was a point where I was like, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, where I was like, God, I've got to leave my job and I've got to do this full time, because I seriously believed it was going to be, that good. To sort of self-sustain. But I think looking back, I made the correct decision not to, because obviously I'm happy where I am now. Just when your hobby becomes your work, that's probably sort of, again, alarm bells. You don't really want to step over that line. You want to keep it a hobby and be passionate about it. If you made it your work, you probably wouldn't be as passionate about it, I'd say.
Yeah, and also I suppose it's something you touched upon, and the wait time for getting cards graded can obviously be around longer than 6 months, just especially due to the current economic climate we're in, where a lot of things have closed, parcels are taking longer to get there, and I suppose it can be, difficult for people who have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories attached to certain cards, which I suppose sometimes is worth. Don't particularly have a monetary value attached to them because it's a memory, I suppose. I suppose it can be difficult for people to kind of send them off into the unknown and potentially not get them back for a year later, and it's a very long time to wait, I suppose. So again, I'm not too sure if there's, as you talked about your first experience sending cards off, you felt a bit hesitant and you thought it might have been a bit dodgy. So if there are people looking to do that service, and what can they look for, I suppose, to make sure that they're being safe, I guess, and protecting themselves to not get scammed or ripped off from something? Because I'm guessing the whole scam issue translates back to this, where there are dodgy websites out there.
Again, great question. Something which I think is very important is to obviously ensure that those who are looking to grade their cards or looking just to enhance their collections and go through their trading cards that they've had for years, which remind them of their childhood, or if they even obviously want to do the main reason. One of the reasons, as I say, I've always said there's 2 reasons to grade cards. One for the nostalgia purposes and memory, and 2 is enhancing the price value. If it's going to be in a slab, it's going to be always worth more. So my advice to those looking to grade your cards is definitely do your research. Find out which graders out there. I'm going to name a few, just so it saves you guys time. Ludkin's Collectables are very big in the market, and as well as Graded Gems. Graded Gems is run by 2 dudes who I was thinking of sort of collaborating with, hopefully, but I haven't sort of reached out to them. Obviously, with my sort of as I say, a small fish in the grading industry. So they are really cool. They have a sort of a Insta and a YouTube channel as well. So you can just tell that they're authentic and legitimate and how professional they are. So those two, Lardkins Collectibles and Graded Gems, I'd say are good. So how can you protect yourself? Make sure you send your cards exactly how the professional intermediary graders tell you to. So what you do is you send them well protected. Don't send them just in a letter and in a letterbox. You want to ensure your package. You want to send it tracked and make sure it's well protected in sleeves and top loaders or card savers, and obviously just make sure you keep in touch and send them your return address. Otherwise, that could be a bit of a problem if they receive your cards and they don't know who you are or what you've sent. Just be very, very methodological on what you're doing. And there's no way with those kind of grading companies that anything could go wrong, really. So honestly, take the plunge. It might seem like you're sending your childhood memories away for a moment, but when they come back, I promise you, when you open that box and pull out your cards, you will be transported back to the first time you ever opened a Yu-Gi-Oh pack. That's probably how I can draw parallels with it. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever it is that you're passionate about, getting your cards graded it's like opening a new world, a new portal to a whole world of collectability, and you'll definitely be hooked by the time by the time you get your cards back, Connor. That's for sure. You're yet to have that experience yourself, right?
Yeah. No, I haven't had that yet. But yeah, I know something you just mentioned about that is it's also something I've learned about, particularly over the last 6 months, is the fact that people should purchase these kind of soft plastic sleeves, and then also what you call top loaders, which is more of a hard, sturdy thing, and that just adds protection so it doesn't get damaged in the mail. But something I am actually curious about, which I don't know myself, is what is the reason behind having to use a third-party service like, say, the companies you just mentioned and yourself? Is it that you have to get a certain registration with PSA so that ordinary people can't just send them over, or does it work out a lot cheaper going through a company like yourself?
Yeah, very good question. In short, there's a couple of reasons as to why it's cheaper, but it's also more convenient. So people who are of our age, or perhaps even slightly older, working, let's say, 4 or 5 days a week, 9 to 5, like myself, you just really haven't got the time to dedicate putting your cards into the system. Least to say, it does cost around $200 to activate your PSA account. Anybody can register from anywhere in the world, but it's going to initially cost you a little bit of money. But secondly, it's going to take you much time to get that all registered in. And it basically takes away the stress and the hassle. Even though you are paying, let's say, $2-3 more per card, which is a couple of quid really, that time, stress, and least to say, knowledge, because if you are out of touch with the game for 10-15 years, you have to get each set, each year, each edition, each variant of the card. There's so many different types of cards that the professional intermediaries like myself actually spend time researching and making sure it's the correct one, because what good is an incorrect label to a card that doesn't correlate? But also a massive third reason really as to why it's probably better to go through an intermediary is sort of the return postage, and also postage actually sending them to PSA. Myself doing it, I can tell you it can cost anywhere between £50 to £250 sending them, and on the return as well, it's a good £200 return. So those are additional costs that you don't have to pay if you are bulk sending, and that's why the big intermediaries send out lots of hundreds and perhaps even thousands of cards each month to PSA, so they do all return at once. It's kind of like just basically for postage reasons and saving money, and that's why they do it. And that's again why I used to only accept sort of 80 plus cards each month. I used to do on average. Well, I'd always send a couple of my own cards as well, but those sort of three main reasons: one, time and stress, and just more efficient doing so. Second is the actual sort of price as well, and I'd say just convenience really.
And I've only got a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. With regards to, say, the boom that we've experienced during 2020 in the trading card market, how do you think this is going to go? Because I know a lot of people have talked about that it's a bubble waiting to burst, but I suppose there's kind of three ways that this could go. It could either the bubble could burst and things could drop off, prices could plummet through the floor. They could continue rising, or they could just level off or rise or go drop a little bit and level off again. In your own opinion, where do you think this market's gonna go?
Yeah, what do I think is going to happen? That's a very good question, because I'm sure I can speak for myself, but hopefully on behalf of a lot of your podcast listeners as well, Connor, I think when you were younger, you were like, these cards are going to be worth so much money when I'm older, and it never really happened, did it? Until recently, right? All those rare cards that you've been sitting on have finally got the attention that they deserve. Why? Because they're so rare. They're so rare to find. So take a classic Ghost Rare or a Holo Charizard. It was very difficult to pull one of those cards back in the day. And again, that's never going to be taken away from a card, is it? The actual rarity to pull. It's never going to change. The ratios were fixed. It's very hard to get those good cards. In relation to what we've seen this year with the collectible market and bubble getting ever so bigger, I think we have already started to see a little bit of a leveling in the Pokemon world, whereby some of these sort of base set cards are actually leveling out, dropping post Logan Paul and Gary V and all those big people in the collectibles Pokemon market. It's kind of leveling out already, so I think we will see a gradual decline, but only to level off into a consistent sort of price. It's definitely gonna drop to where it was, but much higher. So it's gonna level out. But what I think is gonna happen is there's gonna be sort of another time frame where, this is just my own personal prediction, by the way. I've never sort of really mentioned it to anybody, to be fair, before. So what I think is going to happen is, this is one of the first couple of booms. I don't know how many more booms there will be, but I think sort of the final boom will lie with what you mentioned earlier in the podcast, Connor, in relation to the art. I think we will see Yu-Gi-Oh cards in museums in the future. I think we will see sort of dedicated places for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, similar to how we have, M&M World and those big brands and stuff like that. I think we will see a collectibles museum where these cards will be on show. It's a part of history, really. Something as big as Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. Pokemon's, like, as I say, the biggest franchise in the world. So I definitely think for Pokemon, to say the least, we'll see those cards similar to the Mona Lisa, but like behind shields and shields of protective glass, or whatever you want to put it, and because it's going to be just very valuable. That's where I think it will end up in the future. People can display their collections in museums, so you could see a CasualYuGiStuff section with all my best cards on display, and that's pretty much where I think it's going to go futurely. In relation to the collectible world. Connor, what do you think? Is that a bit of a wild interpretation, or do you think that's possible?
No, I don't think that's a wild prediction, because when some people might be listening to this thinking like that's a crazy statement to make, but when you think about that, at the minute there are cards out there which I know some have been sold for excess of $200,000, but there are rumours and looking at articles online that there are cards out there that are far rarer than that and worth potentially over $1 million. And when there's something that rare, then it could very easily end up in a collectibles museum, or because again at the minute I suppose it's a big conversation around supply and demand, where there's only so much supply of these rare cards in these conditions, I guess, because they're 20 odd years old and no more can be made, and currently there's a big demand for it. So I suppose as long as the demand is kept up there, and I guess there'll always be an interest in this, but I suppose a lot of people now who are moving into their 20s and 30s, perhaps getting into families, having kids of their own, they're probably trying to pass on a lot of their own childhood memories. I think that's just a natural thing parents do to their own kids, and I suppose if they grew up with card collecting and it's the current thing now, I suppose that could be something they could try and pass on to their kids, I guess. So yeah, I don't think that's an outlandish statement to make at all.
No, for sure, and I think you're right in saying you're passing down the tradition, but also there will come a time where further down the line I may have to sacrifice my hobby for other reasons, of course. I can't say what reasons now. I can't predict the future. I wish I could, but there will be times where I think, we will put these aside, and perhaps in 20 years' time, I will have. Who knows where my collection will be? I know that some cards will still with me, but will all of it be with me? I don't know. But for that reason, I think we'll see a continual, boom. Whether it's going to go up. It might go up and down, back up again, a little bit down, but it's always going to, I think, steadily increase. The market is anyway. But futurely, I think there could be a potential sort of deadline. But when we are, again, sort of 20, 30 years on, these cards are going to be 50, 60 years old, and it's going to be incredible. Trust me, I think by then, the future of how we've seen, just in this year, the significance of how something can change the way the world goes round. Anything's possible. That's why I'm such a strong believer. I want to fully commit myself and be passionate. And I think if you are, thinking about entering the collectors, community and world, you definitely should. Don't be ashamed of what you're collecting. Be passionate and prideful as to what you are doing, and just enjoy it. And don't let anybody take that away from you. And that's sort of, again, back to why I started my YouTube channel. I'll even tell people, like, I've got a YouTube channel. I really just don't care, because what they're going to say, like, unless they're horrible people, they'll judge you, but people will just back you and support you if you're surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. To be honest, that's my advice, like I'd give any sort of listeners to this podcast, really.
Yeah, and that's because there's a lot of people who listen to this, so the magazine has a very creative audience, whether that mainly from the design and photography and art community, I guess, but it also crosses over to a lot of other different areas, and I think that message can cross over to a lot where people are trying to express themselves with the work they do. And just to end off this interview, I just wanted to ask you a question, but as this conversation's gone on, I realised that there might be different answers to this question depending on where a person's intention lies. So I was going to ask, for people who perhaps have either previously had a childhood experience with this, or don't have any experience into card collecting, that either want to get into it as a collector to perhaps make a little bit of money, but also in a fun, quirky way that has some nostalgia, or people who want to perhaps pass this on to their childhood. Where can people start? But I'm guessing that it does depend, that answer might depend on which direction people are going in, whether they're looking to become a collector or whether to pass that on as a hobby.
For sure, there's definitely an entrance method for anyone into the hobby, into the passion, into the collectible world. I think if you have an initial foundation, it's quite simple to build on it. That's like what I did, and I think similar for yourself, Connor. You knew about it and you did it when you were younger, but if you have no sort of idea but were really keen and active to get into it, like I say, all you need is a motivation, and all you need is to surround yourself with the right people. I think also what's quite big personally is the Instagram community. There's a community for Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon, there's a community for everyone in every game. Make yourself present online in a digital way. Surround yourself with the people who are there to help and support you. And if you see it and it feels right, go for it, buy it, trade it, do what you feel is right. Trust your gut, like I always have, and when I'm opening my videos and doing my YouTube channel, I always believe. Obviously, I believe in the heart of the cards. Let's just put it that way, to cringily end it off, really. But no, I think there's always an entrance method. You just got to find it and know what's right for you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode with Jamie Dolphy. This podcast is now available on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. If you would like to follow us on social media, then all the links can be found on the 99% Lifestyle website or in the description of this episode. At the end of each interview I conduct, I ask interviewers to give me 5 recommendations for our audience. This can be from books you should read, musicians you haven't heard of, or simply recommending another creative that you should follow or check the work out of. These recommendations are sent out as a free newsletter each and every week to the 99% Lifestyle newsletter subscribers. All issues are archived on our website too, so if you do miss an issue or would like to see the backlog we have, you can simply go and scroll through all of them. If you would like to read Jamie's recommendations, then head over to the 99% Lifestyle website and you'll be able to find his recommendations as a recent issue. If you sign up to the newsletter, then that is also the best way to be updated on new podcast episodes, blog posts, and product releases. Thank you again for listening to today's episode. We'll be back very soon in 2021.